Thank you, Governor Rendell and Secretary Salazar, for your good words. And thank you, Gordy, for representing the families that I'm looking at before me. When I was first here on September 17th, 2001, this quiet field was scarred by a smoldering crater. Our grief was raw, and our heartache was heavy. We were just learning the names of those aboard Flight 93 and the story of their sacrifice. This peaceful place was not chosen by the terrorists. They had other targets for their violence and hate. This spot was chosen by the passengers of Flight 93, who spared our country from even greater horrors. As we gather to remember those who were lost and honor their courage, we are deeply grateful. The events of September 11th grow distant in time, but they remain vivid in the memory of our nation and in the hearts of those who suffered such a great loss. Over the years, we've learned the stories of those last minutes aboard Flight 93. Passengers placed calls to authorities to warn them of the hijacking. We know they call family members to assure them of their love and to tell them of their plans. One passenger called his wife and said, "I know we're all going to die. There's 3 of us who are going to do something about it. I love you, honey." And we know that in the midst of their fear, they were calmed by their faith. A crew member called her husband and told him that they were going to rush the hijackers. Over the phone line, he heard other passengers whispering the 23rd Psalm. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me." 9 years ago, in the skies above this field, and in Washington and in New York City, we saw the worst of our enemy and the best of our nation. And we were suddenly reminded of many half-forgotten lessons. We saw that there is evil in the world, but also good at the heart of our country. America was attacked, but the deepest belief of our democracy was vindicated, that our greatness and strength is found in the character of our citizens. Americans responded with heroism and selflessness, with compassion and courage, and with prayer and hope. In our grief, we learned that our faith is an active faith, that we're called to serve and care for one another, and to bring hope and comfort where there's despair and sorrow. We remember 9/11 not only as a day of great loss, but also a day of recommitment to certain enduring values. When the innocent are attacked, Americans defend them. When the innocent suffer, Americans rally to their aid. In the face of terror, Americans chose to overcome evil with good. And it was following the tragic events of that September morning that we saw the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. We saw it here as Shanksville's first responders rushed to this field, and in the endurance of all of those who worked past exhaustion to rescue people trapped in the towers and the Pentagon. And again, as millions of Americans participated in blood drives, candlelight vigils, and memorial services, saying prayers in English, Hebrew, and Arabic. And we found unity in the shared grief. When this field was marked by smoldering ashes, now there is green grass. But the passage of time cannot erase the images etched in our minds from that calm September morning. We remember the moment the news came, where we were, and what we were doing. George and I grieved with the families whose loved ones perished on that bright blue morning. We thought about your loss every day that we lived in the White House, and your stories remain close to our hearts. George sends his love. And today we join with all Americans as we pause to remember those most affected by that day. We remember the families and friends of the lost, and we still feel the wound of September 11th. We know the memories of your loved ones have not aged by time. You inspire us with your grace and strength. We remember the law enforcement and intelligence personnel who stand watch on our behalf at every hour. And we remember the men and women of our military who oppose radicalism and terrorism at this very hour in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places around the world. On this day, Americans have no division. Together, we recall the events that changed each one of us and that united our nation. Together, we honor the lost in silence, and we remember that our quiet and peace is always defended by the courage of the brave. Thank you all. God bless you, and God bless America.
Thank you so much for the beautiful music, and thank you so much for those wonderful words, Mrs. Bush. You once again have proven to be a source of strength and comfort for these families in this community, and I know everybody thanks you. And now it is my extreme honor and privilege to introduce to you Mrs. Michelle Obama, the First Lady of the United States of America, who has also demonstrated her dedication continuously to America's heroes and to its future. She's constantly lending her ear, her caring presence, and her passionate voice to the men and women whose services and sacrifice keep our nation safe, and to their families who make so many sacrifices of their own. Her tireless advocacy on their behalf reminds us of the values that unite us all, even in our most difficult moments: love of country, respect for our nation's heroes, and the obligation that each of us has to give something back to our communities. First, let me welcome Mrs. Obama to the family of Flight 93. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our nation's First Lady, Mrs. Michelle Obama.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Joanne, for that very kind introduction. It is a privilege and an honor to be here today as we pay tribute to the men and women of Flight 93. I want to acknowledge Secretary Salazar, Governor Rendell, and Gordon Felt, and I want to thank them all for their leadership and for their service. I also want to thank Reverends Britton and Way for leading us in prayer. And I want to particularly recognize and thank Mrs. Bush, not just for her moving words today, but for being such a source of love and support for the families of Flight 93, and for all her work to help our nation heal in the days and months after the attack. Thank you so much. I come here today not just as First Lady on behalf of my husband and a grateful nation. I come as an American filled with a sense of awe at the heroism of my fellow citizens. I come as a wife, a daughter, and a sister, heartbroken at the loss so many of you have endured. And I come as a mother, thinking about what my daughters and what all of our sons and daughters can learn from the 40 men and women whose memories we honor today. The men and women of Flight 93 were college students and grandparents. They were businessmen, pilots, and flight attendants. There was a writer, an antique dealer, a lawyer, an engineer. They came from all different backgrounds and all walks of life. And they all took a different path to that September morning. But in that awful moment, when the facts became clear and they were called to make an impossible choice, they all found the same resolve. They agreed to the same bold plan. They called the people they loved, many of them giving comfort instead of seeking it, explaining they were taking action and that everything would be okay. And then they rose as one. They acted as one. And together they changed history's course. And in the days that followed, when we learned about the heroes of Flight 93 and what they had done